Here. Okay, so everyone, welcome to Building and Sustaining Engagement During Periods of Disruptive Change. I've got Kelly and Anne here with me, and they're going to share all of their insights on, building company culture and how to keep that company culture through this time. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in the question and answer box. If it's something relevant to the topic that we're on at that point in time, we'll try and clear off those questions where we can, and then we may, where applicable, hold them till the end. You as an attendee can also post in the group chat if you have something to say as well. So yeah, don't be afraid to put up your hand. We're going to keep a really casual format today, so if you have questions, please just interject and we'll do our best to answer. And so with that, I will just kick us off with, my name is Lisa Genovese. I'm president at BottomLine. We've been doing these webinars weekly for the past little while, and just wanting to keep people informed on very relevant topics that we've been faced with over the past while. So with that, Kelly and Anne, would you guys mind introducing yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So my name's Kelly. I am an HR consultant with about 20-ish years in the industry. I focus on leadership, culture, and civility. So how do we really have people engaged, bringing their best to the office and understanding where everyone else is coming through with the goal of acting with respect at all times. I've lived mostly in Calgary, but I have traveled fairly extensively, spent a year in the Arctic, spent a year in Panama, and a few spots in between because I enjoy the whole aspect of understanding culture. And I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome.
My name is Anne, and I'm also an HR consultant, and I have been working as an HR consultant for 26 years, and the vast majority of that, interestingly, it has been as an independent consultant. So I've been working in a home office and remotely from all of my clients for a very long time. So this new world is actually my normal world. My HR practice work is, the majority of it is at a strategic level, working with organizational development and the development and implementation of HR management processes. And I also spend about 1/3 of my practice work doing compensation work. So I'm very much a generalist HR person on that level as well. And I am in Calgary and have lived here for most of my adult life.
Great.
And I'm glad to be here today as well.
Super, guys. Thanks for introducing yourselves. So the first question I have got for you is, how does disruptive change affect an organization?
A lot of the time, I would say that it depends on the organization. And obviously, if it's disruptive, which means that it's broad and it's deep and it's unruly and disturbing. So those are sort of core factors of disruptive change. And how it affects the organization really depends on the organization itself, the type of culture that it has. So, for example, organizations that have inclusive cultures where new ideas and a diversity of perspectives are encouraged. And if it's a continuous learning organization, then how that organization responds to disruptive change is going to be very dramatically different than an organization that is of an opposite type or is not quite as innovative as the learning type organizations tend to be. So it very much depends on the organizational culture. Much like everything else in an organization, that is basically the foundation of it all. Kelly probably would like to add something to that.
Yeah, I think disruptive change also, the impacts are a lot of what the leaders influence. So if you have leaders that are used to working in a fast moving organization or entrepreneurial in spirit, and that's just how they live their life, then disruptive change might actually energize them and keep them going, and they see the opportunities to try things a different way, versus leaders who have a more staid culture and are used to a good status quo. They like their process, they like their technology, they like the routine check-ins with their teams. This is going to stress them out a little bit because those aren't working quite as well as we like. So I think how the leaders handle this disruptive change will really impact how the organization comes out of it and how their employees are feeling on a day-to-day basis. The opportunity is there to shine.
That's great. And I think those are some excellent points. I'm curious, how does culture, affect your company's ability to deal with disruptive change? Um, I know that this has been kind of uncharted waters for many leaders, and I've been asked this question quite a lot. So thoughts? We'll go Anne and then Kelly again.
Well, how does it affect the organization? It's, I guess, maybe we could just pop up that little image that I had sent you, and we can chat about that a bit, and that might actually give us a bit of a perspective on it.
Share my screen. If attendees could just maybe hit in the chat box. Can you guys see the screen? Okay. Anybody? There we go. Yes. Awesome. Thank you guys. All right. Go ahead there.
Okay. So when you look at this, and this is sort of a bit like the normal curve that we see in a lot of the understanding how people progress their way through change. So this is essentially similar for individuals as it is for organizations. And when I look at it and think about it, we're going along in a normal kind of fashion. Every day seems, pretty reliable. We know what's happening. We know what to expect. We're able to do the things we want to do. We don't run out of toilet paper when we go to the supermarket to buy it. And then we realize something is different. We start to recognize a change is happening. And then suddenly we are in a realization point where we say, oh my gosh, something big is going on here. Something is changing. So we move from recognition to realization very, very quickly. And then what we're doing from an individual and from an organizational perspective is we start to respond to the change. So we go recognition, response. And when we're responding, this is where, how we respond depends on the organizational type, the culture, or if it's an individual response, where it depends on how we react to change ourselves. If we halt because we come to a point of fear and we don't know what to do, so we do nothing as we try and figure it out. Or if we say, okay, we need to do something, so let's start somewhere. Let's address the first thing that we can think of to deal with. So it very much depends on the organization, but at some point, all of us do something. And doing nothing is a choice as well. So that is essentially doing something. Then we start with our response. Here we have an issue we have to deal with, something that has disturbed our normal, and this is very out of control from us. So how are we going to respond to it? What are we going to do? Again, from a cultural perspective and from a reactive perspective, it very much depends on the organization. And I'll come back to some of those little points you see on the bottom in a sec. And we move through that. And again, depending very much on the organization or the individual, some of us respond rapidly, we figure it out fast, and we make decisions and move very sharply. This curve tends to be more normal, but you could see a sharp down, a flatter, bumpy bottom, and then a sharp up, or you can see a longer decline and a longer settling in the bottom, and then a very much sharper or slower climb, very much dependent on culture, organization, individual. A lot of the time, the timelines that are involved in these kinds of things are the things related to how well prepared you are as an individual or as an organization to actually deal with a disruptive change. So how prepared are you for this? Have you thought about the sort of extremes of What if we're extremely successful? How would we manage that? What if we're extremely unsuccessful? How will we manage that? What's my worst case scenario? What's my best case scenario? It depends on how you perceive that sort of thinking, you know, the pros and the cons of situations, or your risk management processes, which some organizations have very coherent, well thought out risk management processes. Some don't have any at all. So again, that very much depends on the organization. So how prepared are you? What are your resources like? What kinds of resources do you have? Do you have enough resources to deal with the change? So, you know, for most of us as individuals, one of our very first thoughts is, can I pay my bills? Do I have enough money in my bank account to pay my bills for as long as this goes, or at least for the first few months till I figure out what to do next? And organizations are much like that. And a lot of that comes and is settled on what are the values of the organization or the individual. What do I think is important? What do I rest on when it comes to my decision making? How do I process things? So those values are things that are going to have a huge impact on how you deal with a disruptive change. And the last piece of it is the processes. Are my processes designed in a way that makes it possible for me to deal with the situation? Or am I limited by the processes that I have that I can't deal with them? So that's essentially how does disruptive change affect organizations and also individuals, because organizations are just a cluster of individuals all working together, right? So thank you for sharing that with us, Lisa.
No
Appreciate it.
problem. I'll just stop my screen share here. So, Kellie, I'm curious, from your perspective, like how does culture again, affect the company's ability to deal with the change? Anything that you would add to what Anne had to say?
I think the main thing I would add to that is trying to remember that we are all in this together, and wherever you're seated in the organization, you have the opportunity to practice your personal leadership and maybe cut some slack for your leaders as well. I find even just listening to the news, right? You listen to the Prime Minister, the Premier give an address, and then the reporters are right on top. Well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Well, give me more information. And it's like, I think it's important we try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the best that they can with the information they have. And when you're in your organization, I think most leaders are trying that too. This is a brand new experience for everybody. So what you might have learned in your leadership course or what worked at your retreat last year might not apply this time. So if we can all try to support each other that way, I think that is really helpful. And for a practical tip or something to try, most of us have done some type of personality test, whether it's Myers-Briggs or DISC or something. Maybe pull that out and take a look, because a lot of people, I think, are flipping to the dark side. So what happens when you're pushed to a new level of stress? Maybe you're generally collaborative, but now it's getting to be a lot, and you're flipping to the hoarding the toilet paper information, whichever fits. So that's what I would add.
Really excellent points. And I know even for myself, when this first started to unfold, I remember I think it was the Friday they had announced the new EI rules, and we all went, okay, it's going to be okay. And then the Saturday they changed them, and the whole business community had a heart attack. And I remember coming. By that time, we were working from home. We had shifted everybody into the office, and I remember coming onto Zoom that Monday morning, though, and having a conversation with my team, and people were looking to me for answers that I really didn't have, and that was hard. That was really hard. And I felt, I guess, alone, that I should know the answers and that I should be able to tell them. And so I have come to the realization that it's okay to tell them, hey, I don't know myself, but you'll be the first to know when I do. Because really doing all we can do right now is all we can do.
And that's what some of the research on leadership shows, is that Most people just want some type of acknowledgement that the leader understands the challenge, that they understand what people are going through, and to be honest, that you don't know. How could you know? And here is maybe what the 3 steps you're going to take um, to try to give them as much information, and asking for that feedback, asking how they can help too, because it's a lot of pressure on everybody. So
Yeah, absolutely. But I love the points about going back to your personality profile. We've used, I think it's Real Insights or something similar, based off of Myers-Briggs. But you're right to go and look at what's the negative side to that profile. I know we call them blind spots, and I know myself. I'm very mindful of what my own blind spots are, and they tend to show up when I'm really stressed out. Go figure. And so just that awareness piece is so important. It helps keep you from burning bridges when times get really, really stressful and tough.
it
So
does. And if it's helpful, I'm sure we can send out some links. There's lots of different sort of mini free ones as well. So if you can't find your MBTI or you can't find this test, they'll have some smaller ones online that you can access for free. And it's just more to even get you thinking than, I mean, I'm an ISTJ, and now the I and the J might get super strong. Trying to figure out what that means. So
okay, okay too. So I know that we already kind of went over the image that you shared, Anne, but I know that, again, we've been asked a lot of how long is this actually going to last? Can you speak to that and just kind of give your view?
Sure. So I listened to Jason Kenney's presentation last night at 6 o'clock, and he was talking about, if the peak is rapid, which is not good because that would suggest that the virus is progressing too rapidly, then it would be about the 1st of May, and that would probably mean that a lot of other things would happen, and potentially also that we would pass through that at some point. He also suggested that the more likely situation was mid-May, and in the conversation of that, he talked a little bit about what he thought might be possible in terms of people kind of having a little bit of a release on the social distancing, for example. And somebody said to me this morning that it would be about 6 weeks. And I thought, I don't know that 6 weeks is a realistic thought.
Mm-hmm.
My own view, listening to people and thinking about the progression with China, for example, where China's real situation started in December, and they're just starting back to work apparently now in Wuhan. So that would suggest that we're looking at something in the order of 5 months or so from the start until the point in time when we might start looking at things renewing in some fashion or another. So 5 months from the beginning of March takes us into about August. So my personal view is it would be optimistic to think that July would be a time we could get back to it. And realistically optimistic might be September, and possibly the worst case, hopefully the worst case would be like January, maybe December. But who knows? I don't know. That's just watching what's going, looking at what I've been reading, hearing what people say, and thinking, well, maybe those are realistic timelines. I think one of the big dangers that we all have is if we start to count on 6 weeks out from now, things should be getting back to normal. I think that we may find that if it doesn't happen, that we suddenly have a real down situation with people. And with organizations, individually we'll be like, oh my, this is going to go on forever. What's going to happen? This is really getting depressing and stressful and so on. So then there's going to be a huge drop in everybody's energy. And from an organizational perspective, there will also be an energy drop. And when you think about 25% of people right now in Canada are unemployed, these are some very scary things. So when we think about that optimism and say the big optimistic pieces here, and then we see the possibility that that doesn't happen, I think we will have a point then when we will have some very, very stressed and anxious people. So I
Mhm.
think that's a concern that we should have. And that for most leaders, and especially for HR people, something to be very concerned about from your organizational perspective. So that's my view. My other point on all of this is that that whole notion of disruptive change, what disruptive change does is it changes things in a big, broad, deep way and a very permanent and different way. So when we look at the massive disruptive changes that we've experienced, we have to understand that what normal was and what normal might be, it isn't really going to be the same thing. Um, we're going to go from what we see as normal from yesterday to a renewal of how things are done, and it will be different. And our normal will be a different normal. So I tend to use the word renewal rather than normal, because normal creates the sense that we'll go back to the way it was before. And I don't think we will ever go back to the way it was before. I think this is a seminal moment in the history of the world.
That's a really, really, really excellent point. And I know we were chatting about that before we even got on this webinar about how I think it's an unrealistic expectation and quite naive of people to think it's just going to go back to the way it was. And in some instances, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Change isn't always bad. We can have a positive spin and look at the silver lining and go, okay, well, if that is true, maybe there's some good things that come out of that change as well. So, Kellie, anything that you'd add to that before I move on?
Just a little bit to build on what you just said, that sometimes change can be good, and oftentimes it can be good. I think where we get hung up with this situation a little bit is that we didn't get to choose to change.
Right.
And I know for me, if I make the choice to change, I'm much more successful. I'm much happier going through the process. When I'm forced to change, not as much. So trying to remember that, yes, this has been, put on people, and you do have a measure of control in how you react. And if that means you have to take a nap, if that means you have to readjust your work schedule, if that means that you just need more, FaceTime calls with whoever, then do that. And recognize this is a lot of stress. And there's some interesting research out as well about from trauma-informed counselors that setting up productivity goals need to be realistic, like any other goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, don't challenge yourself to learn a whole brand new language in 3 weeks while trying to manage the stress of everything else. So like anything else, set realistic goals.
I love what you said, and I'm a big advocate of the personality colors piece. So I'm going to go back there for a second. When you talk about setting realistic goals and managing your work style and managing your energy, so we often will use Colby Index, and then we use personality colors as well. And one of the things that we have really cracked down on in the last couple of weeks is watching for what are those indicating or like early warning signs that somebody is really struggling. For the, depending on what profile you follow, green being a big people person, if they have that lack of people right now, they aren't around a lot of people. And so for those in my organization I know that are a high green, we have really been trying to have additional Zoom meetings and trying to run some, just fun game nights and things where my team can interact together. And ones that are used to having that water cooler talk are still getting something to kind of fill their cup up. And so I think that is something people should really be thinking about from a culture perspective. And I'd be curious to hear if the two of you agree with that, is, just being mindful of what are those early warning indicators that somebody might be struggling. And especially for ones that are not getting, what they're used to getting in their workplace day to day.
So I agree. I'm supporting a team right now, and it's a very traditional organization. We always 8 to 5, set break time, set lunch times. We talk at this time and everything. So I'm trying to make a point to connect with each person individually to find out where they're at right now, meet them where they're at. What is it that, if you were to tell me your top 3 things that you need, then let's work together to come up with that plan. Because if it's the interaction, luckily the organization was able to set up a Zoom type of program. If we need to build in 4 or 5 minute checkpoints, whoever wants to join, great. And I always make sure I'm there in case nobody else can get there. But meeting people where they're at is, I think, critical.
Yeah, for sure.
From my perspective, one of the most important things to watch for with people is what's not happening. So the silence, if the work isn't getting done in some reasonable fashion that's been the pattern that's happened in the past, if an individual sounds different than normal when you're talking to them, there's just those very subtle cues that are often the messages that tell you something is going on here that's not great. So that, and the other side of that is it's the behaviors that are dysfunctional in the sense of aggression or bad-temperedness or the inability to accept another's point of view or even think about it when they would normally be that way. So, either behavior that's out of character and or no behavior. So lots of silence. Those are things that I would watch for particularly. For people who are really, really social, I think creating ways for them to be social. So make them in charge of making sure that everybody is participating in some kind of activity. Give them a charge to do that and have them set up some form of interactive thing that people are working on, whether it's a competitive card game or whether it's anything that you can think of that your organization might enjoy. There's lots and lots of possibilities out there. So I think that's one of the things that can happen too, is to create things for those folks to do that will make them social. I think for the folks that are the more introverted sort of individual, there's also a need to pay attention to that, because they too can miss the socializing that they're not getting, even though they're not the ones that you would expect to see missing it. Because loneliness can come from not having your normal amount of socialization, whatever normal is for you. And so can anxiety result from that.
Wonderful. Really, really good points. I see that we had a question come in from Michael S. That says, can you comment about the effect you see the pandemic and everyone working from home will have on the workplace when we get through this? I'm thinking of the idea of productivity and flex time versus, flex workspaces.
So I'm going to jump in with a somewhat odd comment. And my odd comment is, I think that one of the things that's going to happen is that our property taxes as homeowners is going to continue to go up, because those big empty buildings that we have downtown are not going to get filled up anytime soon. And I think that that's one of the things that's going to happen. People are going to realize actually how great it can be to be working in a different kind of way. And speaking from the experience of having done that for a very long time, the levels of productivity that you can have working independently and coming together with a team when you need to be together with the team, and being able to work independently in the way that works the best for you when you're not working with the team. I think those are the things that are going to be very, very different going forward. More people will be working in different ways than have been in the past, and more organizations will manage that differently than they have in the past. I think that the potential exists for many people for productivity to go up substantially. So it may now take them 4 hours to do what it used to take them 8 hours to do. I think that for some people, productivity will go down substantially, and it may take them 12 hours to do what 8 hours used to take. So it very much depends on the individual. I think it also depends on the organization and the type of work they do, obviously. Um, but I think that flexible workspaces have some other challenges associated with them, including the ergonomics of them, the healthiness of the work environment, the ability to control the circumstances you're in, the ability to create reasonable structure for yourself and understand what reasonable structure for yourself is all about. So I think all of those things are going to affect productivity. And I do think that the expectation will rise for flexibility because people will suddenly realize how great it is to be able to say, I'm going to work from 6 until noon, then I'm going to take 4 hours off, and then I'm going to work for 2 or 3 hours, and then I'm going to take the rest of the day off. Yeah. So I think that people are going to start thinking differently about how they structure their days and how they plan their activities in this space.
For sure. Thank you. That's great.
Okay.
I'm going to direct my next question here to Kellie, one that just came in. So how do I actually deal with this kids at home, working from home? Like, how do you actually manage that? Because if you're not used to it, that's like being thrown head first into the deep end.
So I think that comes down to some conversations with your team and your leader, and building the trust that you have with each other that the work will get done. And for a lot of people that are specifically in knowledge roles, whether you are available 8 to 4 like every other day, or like off hours that Anne was just saying, the work still gets done. So you have to manage, when kids nap, then you maybe do some work. If it ever gets nice and they can play in the yard, then maybe you get to do some work. But really, honestly, I think it comes down to speaking with your supervisor and saying, look, I'm balancing 2 kids, 3 dogs, and a husband. I really need to work these times, and this is the work I will accomplish, and this is how I propose to check in. And it comes down to trust. Do you trust each other to get that work done? And this is a good way to really build that, because we can't all operate on the same schedule anymore. It just doesn't work. So trying to continue that thinking is going to cause too much stress and too much animosity. So I would critically just say, here's the schedule that works for me. Mm-hmm. Will this work for you? And maybe you negotiate a couple changes.
And do you either of you have any suggestions around like the mental mindset shift that's needed at working at home versus being in the office?
I do. There's a couple of, corny leadership things about, which lens are you looking through? So when I talk to my team that I'm helping, right, they do have that challenge. There are single parents, kids are at home, kids have homework to do with no teacher. So I specifically, say, okay, what lens am I looking through and how can I help this person structure their day? What challenges am I not considering that they have? And I ask the same of them. So everyone has to report to somebody to get work done. So, I ask them to think of my challenges that I have to try to keep things going. So really, and some people, I strongly encourage them to, sit in a different seat when you're taking somebody else's viewpoint. Put on a hat, sit on the other side of a kitchen table. It's like make that physical effort to change your thinking. It's the same as, when you write a goal, there's support, there's evidence that shows if you write it, not type it, if you write it, it sinks in more. So do those things that help you sink in. Do those concrete little actions, and no one's there to see if you think it looks silly. No one's there to tell. Just make it a game.
Makes total sense.
There's another piece to that too, and it is that when you are working in an environment that is outside of the physical control, where you can't see what the other person is doing, for both the leaders and supervisors and the employees, the incredibly important piece of all of that is for people to understand that the dynamics of the relationship have changed. Um, the supervisor needs to be a guide, the leader needs to be a guide, and to provide a sense of direction and a sense of inspiration for where are we trying to go and what are we trying to accomplish. And what all of us as workers at whatever level we're working at, we also need to understand that our role is to be collaborative. We can't sit back and say, I'm waiting for you to give me my instructions or to let me know what to do. You need to take on that lens, that perspective that says, I'm responsible for ensuring that I am able to do what I'm doing. So I'm being accountable for what I'm doing. And my accountability means I need to collaborate with my supervisor, whoever they are, with respect to what is my outcome, how am I going to deliver that, when will I deliver that, and making sure that I understand it clearly and I can make a commitment to doing that. And I'm making that commitment with the full knowledge of the things that are limiting my capacity to get things done at any given point. So it changes the nature of the relationship from a supervisor employee, with the supervisor being in charge, to the two people being collaborators in achieving a common goal.
That's great. The two things I'm hearing in there is, around being outcome focused, which I think most managers, leaders need to really start adopting that right now. It's impossible to, if you can't physically be there, you really just have to trust the work is getting done. And, at the end of the week, if something was assigned and it's not done, it's pretty clear that it wasn't done. And that plays into the second point, and it's a question actually that somebody just sent in, is routine is like critical. And how, any tips or tricks around routine and how that may affect your productivity at home.
Well, Kelly and I work together quite a bit, and I have to say our routines are exactly opposite. I'm a morning person, like I'm usually up before 6 o'clock, and I'm usually doing things and getting things done in the early part of the day. Kelly tends to be a bit of a night hawk, so she's going to be doing them on the opposite end of the day. And knowing when your best times to work are is actually really fantastic for you in order to be really productive and to actually be successful in establishing your routine. And the other thing is setting boundaries. Kelly and I work at opposite ends of the day, and she might send me something at 2 in the morning, but she doesn't expect me to answer it at 2 in the morning. And it would be completely unrealistic for me to do that, because even if I did happen to answer her, she probably wouldn't get anything valuable out of that. It would be pretty bad, no doubt. So it's actually knowing what works for you, creating the boundaries and creating the structure, and making sure that when you set those boundaries that you pay attention to the personal side of it as well as the organizational side or the work side of it, because it's easy when you're working independently to let work rule your life. And I know that because I did that. And if you let work rule your life, vacation takes last space, your family takes a different space, and ultimately it leaves you very unhealthy and very unhappy. So it's important to establish those boundaries and to make sure that you're setting them in ways that are meaningful for you, not for someone else.
Awesome. Thank you. I see another one that just came in. What happens if people don't seem to be able to think past their own fear and only see things from their own point of view? Good question. Either of the two of you want to chime in?
Oh, that's tricky. I think getting the fear on the table and make it a conversation. We had a few years ago, I was working with a team and there was a lot of underlying fear. And so I could sense it, but I didn't know what it was. So one day when we went into a meeting together, I brought an elephant with me and I set it in the middle of the table. And I said, something is inhibiting the conversations we're having here. I don't work here full time. I don't know what's going on in the background that I don't know. But what I do know is something is. And it feels to me like there's a fear of the change in the future. And this elephant sitting on the table is to remind us that we need to talk about the fear. And then we did. We started talking about it, and it really was a fear of what was happening in their industry at the time and the radical changes that were occurring there. And the last time I was in their boardroom, which is probably about 6 or 8 months ago, because I'm not working with them full time regularly anymore. And the elephant that I gave them is still sitting on the shelf in their boardroom, even though they've moved into a new facility and even though they are not in that same place anymore, they still have the elephant. And I think, it's a reminder. And sometimes that's all it takes is, like, here's something we need to talk about. And we put it out on the table and have this conversation and we keep it there to remind ourselves to have it. And it doesn't have to be an elephant. I just thought that was amusing.
That's great. Thank you. Really, really good answer. I just want to hit pause here for a second. Audience, any questions that you have for our panelists before I keep us moving forward? Just want to give you the opportunity. If there's something that's popped up for you as we've chatted, feel free to pop it in that question and answer box. Okay, if you're typing, keep typing. I will come back to you. The one thing I'm wondering is, what are companies doing, to help their team members relieve stress? And I could even share a couple of things that we've done. One of the small things on our team meetings on Fridays, usually we try to save a bit of time for just something fun to do together. And the last couple of weeks, we've been working furiously and haven't done that. However, last week I made the point of, I said, okay, we got to get back to this. And so we played a couple of games, and one that we often will do is Pictionary. And now my team, obviously, given the nature of our business, is very creative. But not all of us draw very well, especially me. And so we just break into two teams, and one person kind of chairs the game. And the person that's kind of facilitating will Slack message the drawer on each team what they're drawing, and then they have a paper and like a notebook, and they're drawing it out with a pen and holding it up to their Zoom camera. Like, we're not getting fancy with whiteboards or anything, but just the difference in tone between when we start those meetings till at the end after we've done something fun like that is just everybody having a good laugh has really made a difference in, helping keep stress levels down. So that's just a small example from my side, but I'm curious if either of you have tips or tricks on how leaders can help keep stress levels down during this time.
So I've been doing some similar stuff. So, we're really quite lucky that we have the technology to see and hear each other from afar. So that helps. So we start each morning with a meme or a joke or something that we send out to the group. A few of us do try to rotate it. Obviously still like work appropriate. We also, throw in comments every once in a while. My team are big bakers, so they like to throw out their latest recipes, and it's kind of fun because it's an Indigenous organization, so they have all kinds of different things, and then you throw in one of our individuals has a Ukrainian background, so it's like a smorgasbord of very interesting stuff. And then we always try to end the day with a Netflix review. So who's watched what would you recommend? So we just try to have that sort of coffee talk over the it's called Mattermost. So we do that, and then doing those individual check-ins again. So just a quick what's happening, what's going on. And because everyone reacts to stress differently, I try to make a point as the leader to throw it out that if someone just wants to vent about a situation, they don't have someone else to vent to, Then I make it clear, we agree this is a venting session, you just needed to get something off your chest, and nothing happens with it. And then we continue on. So giving people an outlet. And I'm working on us having a joint dance party because I saw that happening on the news. So I'm not sure. We have a couple fellas that are a little shy to do that. So we'll see how it goes.
Oh, that's awesome. I feel a challenge coming on for our next team meeting. That's fantastic. And we all just have to try and have a sense of humor through this too, right? Find something that's fun, that lifts us up when we're feeling down. The other one that we do, what's your apple and what's your onion from the week? So simple, but and it can be anything business or personal related. It doesn't matter. And sometimes people are like, the onion is my husband forgot to take the garbage out, to something more catastrophic. Like it really can be anything, but similar to your point, Kelly, where it's what do you need to just get off your chest or vent, and just holding space for that person to get it out is really helpful.
And I think what I'm hearing is it depends on who you are, and it depends on the organization that you're in, what might work and what might not work. And most organizations have a sense of what works in their organization. So those are the kinds of things that will probably work when you're working remotely as well. For for the remote workers, for me, my way of doing things is to get in touch with the folks that I collaborate with as peers, and talk to people about ideas, share ideas, do some of the things that you've talked about, like, oh geez, this has been just a cruddy week, I've had this happen or that happen or whatever it might be. Or also, this has been just an absolutely great week. This has happened, it's been great. And whether it's personal or professional, isn't, just depends on what it is. The other thing that is important, I think, for remote workers to do is to remember that if you're feeling isolated and left out, that's the time to talk to somebody. So, and it can be about something different. You don't have to talk about feeling isolated and left out. What you need to do is get involved. So organizations that create potential for people to be involved outside of what they do normally. So a group that I'm involved with has been making masks, sewing masks, and sharing them with others because of the shortage of masks. And it all started because of a hospital situation. A niece of mine needed masks. She's a nurse, and they were running short of masks, and they're actually right now worried that they will be out of masks this week, the N95s. And so there's been a huge push to get 30 masks per nurse per shift, because in a 12-hour shift, a cloth mask has to be changed after every patient, because if it becomes damp inside, then it's more dangerous than actually not having a mask on, because it attracts the virus droplets that are infectious. So for a nurse on an average shift would probably need 30 masks to use if they're cloth masks, and they would have to be cleaned properly after every single shift. So those nurses would be dealing with their masks after their shift. But making masks and providing them out, I now have some masks sitting in my house in case we actually come to a point in the next while where we need to wear a mask. And knowing that, if we go out to the supermarket, putting a mask on is going to mean then taking it off and then making sure that it's properly cleaned and sterilized to wear again. So, that's an activity that's very positive, very proactive, and create a sense of I'm contributing to a bigger picture. I am doing all of these things, and I'm also making sure that I'm creating a safety net for myself if necessary. So, that's another thing that people can do, is how can I help? And asking that question of the people around them, rather than let me know if there's something I can do, which is how we tend to say those things. Instead, switch it around and say, how can I help? And that can help change the nature of everything for everyone.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you, guys. So with that, I just want to give a couple more moments to any questions that attendees may have. Otherwise, we will wrap this up. Anything burning that we didn't cover off today? We were that good, huh?
Maybe we were that lacking in creative questioning and challenging.
We're getting it here. Thanks, Kyle. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Hope that you found this valuable. We will be posting a recording and sending it out to everybody that was registered. So thank you all. And thank you, Anne and Kelly, for your time.
Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you for inviting us to the conversation. We appreciate it. And hopefully our participants enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.